Hi, I'm REESE Schroeder, and I'm going to talk about how I create my art on the computer. There in the glow of the phosphorus screen, given life by the electron beam, are the future of my thoughts and the reality of my dream. I've been working with digital media since 1984. I use machines to make art. Digital art does not replace traditional art. It stands side by side with it. The vast number of tools available with trillions of colors gives me complete freedom to explore my deepest thoughts and my creative journey. I can create any brush. I can use a standard brush. I can manipulate that brush. I can change that brush. I can make a new brush in any shape, any size. With my brushes and my pens and my other tools, I interface with the computer using a digitizer tablet instead of a mouse, which allows a more natural flow. This is an example of how I work freehand using the digitizer as if I were drawing on a piece of paper with a pencil or a pen. I can work very quickly. I can build up layers of lines to create densities and interest. Each one of these lines is individually manipulated. If you notice the little red squares that show up, I can pick any one of those squares and modify that line. This is a work about water and the reflections on water that I created using horizontal freehand brush strokes, some vector forms, and layers of color, building up densities, shifting colors to create the feeling of reflections on the water in a very abstract way. One of my favorite things to work with are vectors, either rigid or curved. Vectors are like point A to point B, where the computer completes the distance between the 2 points based on how I have set up the vector. Following is a work entitled Fragmented Geometries, where I used both rigid and curved vectors. Curved vectors act the same way as rigid vectors, except the distance between point A and point B is defined by a curve dependent on the distance between the 2 points. The following work, titled Together, uses curved vectors to create the forms. This next work, entitled Unexpected Form, is a hybrid of rigid vectors, hand drawing, and cutting and pasting samples from the artwork as I develop it to create different effects, different layers. Here's where I've cut and pasted segments of the existing work and stretching them to create new forms and dynamics. This next work, titled Alone, used thousands of straight lines over multiple layers, changing colors to create a vertical texture that contradicts the three-dimensional horizontal perspective. To capture that feeling of being alone, I felt that this work needed to be minimalist. Red Linen is a work that explores a common fabric and how it's constructed through electronic painting, where hours and hours of freehand lines and swirls and verticals are layered on top of each other to create the pattern effect of the fabric, and abstract forms suggesting a weave in progress with threads and yarn with light shining onto the work. I should note that I never use standard built-in effects or filters. In this instance, the shadows and the three-dimensional depth are created individually by duplication, shifting, rescaling elements. Sometimes a work reveals itself to me as a visual poetry, where the composition is about the simplicity of forms and how they relate to each other and how they relate to themselves through opacity or transparency or translucency. This work, titled Pieces, is composed of 14 elements over a background of hand-drawn textures. This last work I'm going to present today, titled Palm Trees, is inspired from all the palm trees that are around us here in the Coachella Valley. This is a very complex work involving many techniques and tools within the software to create an abstract expressionist painting of how I see palm trees. I use patterns to create a sense of tension and composition in the background, overlaying raster paint brushing, colors, gradients to build a sky that I study and I manipulate and I look at, and I start to sketch out how the tree might appear in this sky. I can change the sky, and here I liked the sunshine versus the sunset that made the work what it is. I love the density of pattern, of line weight, of forms and colors. The vibrancy of the work is very intense in its complexity, but it's a simple abstract idea of what a palm tree is. Thank you so much for watching.